Welcome back. WNST baseball season, although Luke Jones covers more things football for us this time of the year than baseball. And it's still baseball season. And Luke, this time next week, it'll really be baseball season because we'll have actual playoff games and we can hate on the Yankees and the Red Sox and go back to watching meaningful baseball instead of whatever this has been. I know you're monitoring it maybe more than I am or more than some people are. I don't know where the value is in the general scope of my day and a busy life. I think a lot of people feel that way about the Orioles right now. I passed the Nationals ballpark in the rain Monday night going down to the Anthem to see Lenny Kravitz, and there was nobody there either. So, when you're out, you're out, other than people that want to give one last wave to the team before, opening day next year or whatever. But this has been really a fascinating 2 months for the Orioles because I don't know that they've made any real traction toward winning, right? Like, they brought some guys up, they played with some guys, whatever, but I don't know where the evaluative process is if this whole thing is going to get junked next Sunday, right? Like, if at the end they're going to change everything, then I don't know. But they've picked up 15 players. They've had them run around for the better part of 45 or 60 days right now. But I think if you're an Oriole fan, you're just as confused as you were 2 months ago. I don't know that there's any light shed upon any of this, right?
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I mean, there are certainly players that you can look to over the last 2 months that you can take some positives away from. I mean, Cedric Mullins, had a little slump there, but overall he's hit well. DJ Stewart, since he's been promoted, has performed well and has certainly flashed. Jonathan Villar, which was the one major leaguer that they acquired at their deadline, he's been a positive contributor. If you look at some of the metrics, if you are buying into WAR and some of those numbers, he's been one of their best players over the course of the entire season, and he's only been here 2 months, which says a lot more about the rest of the team than VR. But, other than a few individual stories like that here and there, you're right, and that's what's really disconcerting. And that's
every time they give Alex Cobb the ball or Cashner the ball or put Chris Davison in at bat, I don't know what we're really doing, right?
Well, I think, Chris Davis, that's a completely different discussion that will be had and needs to be had in the offseason with whoever is running baseball ops, whether Dan Duquette does, in fact, stay in some capacity, and whatever that title, however that's defined, who knows, whether he doesn't stay, whoever's managing, whoever's coaching, all of that, I want to hear what the plan is for Chris Davis. But beyond that, Alex Cobb's going to be here for the next 3 years, and quietly, and you mentioned how plenty of people have kind of tuned out the Orioles, and rightfully so. Look, I'll be the first to admit when it's a game that they're on the road and I have something else to do or there's something else on TV, I've been watching something else on TV. And you know me, I love baseball as much as anyone. But, in the case of Cobb, he has actually quietly pitched really well over the last couple months. Now, he's kind of limped to the finish line here with blister.
I saw him leave that game with the blister.
Yeah, but if you look at his numbers, and that's not to forgive the first half of the season because he was really, really bad, and we know that he signed so late and didn't have a normal spring training. But having a chance to get to know him a little bit, he's certainly someone who is very routine-oriented, and that makes sense. Successful starting major league pitcher for a long time in Tampa Bay. But you really get the sense with him specifically that, in retrospect, that abbreviated or lack of a spring training entirely probably got to him. But in the big picture, getting back to what you're talking about, Alex Cobb pitched well. He's under contract the next 3 years, but what value is that going to bring to the Orioles other than he seems like a good stand-up veteran pitcher who probably will be a good influence on whichever young pitchers are going to cycle through here.
He's also used to losing, too, that always worries me. The guys that have come from places where they've lost and now they're coming here. And I remember a decade of that because that's all they could attract was Jay Payton and those kinds of players. Guys on one-year deals and the guys that were washed up with the Mets or the Braves. We're going to see that around here because this. Well, the old man was different. I have no idea how these kids that there is no. I don't know if these kids are out. I'm going to see them at Maritime Magic on Friday night. They're going to be standing in the corner talking to nobody because that's who they are. I don't know where the message is coming from, dude.
Sure.
That's really the story here. We have uncommunicative, really, really wealthy kids who don't have to talk to anybody about anything and can sort of run from 115 losses if they choose to and count their money. It's disgusting. It's gross, and it doesn't help the fan base here. And it certainly is not going to help the fan base over the next 6 months if the Ravens are 9-5 and playing good football. And this, I mean, the Orioles will just go away. No one will even know they're there. I mean, I don't know what their fan fest looks like this year. That's for sure.
Yeah, and that's going to be really interesting. I mean, that's something that I opined at WNST.net last week when the Orioles officially surpassed the 88 club for losses in a season. I was just thinking, I mean, what is this team going to sell to its fan base at FanFest? I mean, they'll inevitably, people that just love baseball, and it's January, and it's cold, and it's depressing and gray out, and they'll get people to come. I mean, maybe not a whole lot of people, but the people that do show up for that, what are you selling them? I mean, what exactly are? I mean, I think you look at where they are right now as an organization.
Well, no one's been fired. I mean, they haven't even. I mean, at least Andy McPhail came out in a Coogee sweater 7 years ago when they stunk. There's been nothing in front of this other than propping Buck up every night. It's incredible.
Well, and I mean, Dan Duquette spoke at length about it at the trade deadline, that they were rebuilding and they were going to start investing more in the international market, which they have started doing a little bit. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, wake me up when they sign Victor Mesa, okay?
Sure,
wake me up, sure.
But he hasn't been signed by anyone yet, and he just recently became eligible to be signed because he had to establish a residency outside of Cuba. But they have the most slot money, so. In terms of it just being about money, and we don't know if that will ultimately be his decision, the Orioles have more money to spend than anyone else in that regard. But you're right. Your overall point is right, and I said at the time, and many people said this at the time, even when Dan Duquette was talking the night that they traded Manny Machado on a conference call and saying, this is a clear signal that we're officially entering a rebuilding period where our emphasis is going to be on younger ball players. We're going to put more into analytics. We're going to put more into international scouting. We're going to be players on the international market. All of these things that they need to do, mind you. So I'm not at all taking exception with the message, but Dan Duquette being the one to deliver that at that point in time when he, at that point, had 2 months remaining on his contract, even if you had the intentions of extending him, which, Bob Nightingale had a report over the weekend that's the expectation. And, things that I've heard over the last 6 weeks or so have certainly indicated that Dan Duquette's more likely to stay in some capacity than Buck Showalter. Now, that can also change because 4 months ago I would have told you the exact opposite. So we'll see what happens over the next week. But in terms of the current state of the organization, and when it comes down to it at the end of the day, it's about players, right? I mean, you can talk all you want about developing and the international market. Ultimately, you need to find players no matter how you do it. You need to have talented players, and that's how you win. I mean, you can have a bunch of brilliant baseball minds, but you need talent in this organization. And what I see right now is they have some. There are some players that that are up with this club right now that I say, okay, Cedric Mullins, I could see him being their leadoff hitter over the next 5, 6, 7 years at some point when they're ready to be competitive again. I could see, Trey Mancini's certainly done enough over the last couple of years to make you think that he could be here. I like what I see from a guy like Tanner Scott, for example. I like what I've seen so far from DJ Stewart in 2 weeks, but who knows? But the problem is that I really have with where they stand right now, and this is where I'm almost hesitant to say they're rebuilding. I still feel like they're kind of in that tearing down mode. Is who are the high-end prospects? I mean, okay, they added Yusniel Diaz in the Manny Machado trade. I think a realistic, good outcome for him is he becomes a Nick Markakis caliber kind of player.
Who's the next guy that's going to be an all-star, right? Like, who's going to be in the next 3 out of 5 all-star games?
Yeah,
even as good as a Wieters or a Markakis or a Brian Roberts. Just a really good, not a Hall of Fame player, not Machado, a really good player. Where's that guy coming from, right?
Right. And that's where my concern lies. I think Diaz could be, if he pans out to what a lot of scouts think he can be, I think he could be a guy that could certainly be an above-average major league player. a guy that can be in the mix to make an all-star team every couple years. A Nick Markakis type is what I'm saying, which is fine. That's good. That's a positive. But if that's kind of representing the top end, the top of your prospect list from a positional player standpoint, and he's not the only one. They have Ryan Mountcastle, who they still don't know where he's going to play defensively, but the bat, everyone seems to think the bat's going to play and he's going to be a legitimate major league hitter, but is he just going to be a DH? And if he is, how much value is there to that? So, when you're talking about those types of guys being your top positional prospects, and then you look on the pitching side, and they have some pitching prospects. I mean, they certainly have some guys who could be here in the next year or so that, Keegan Aiken, guys of that nature who can help and be major league pitchers, but for the most part, they all seem to translate to back half of the rotation, number 4, number 5 starter types, which, hey, there's value to that. I don't want to say that that's worthless by any stretch, but in terms of who's the next Dylan Bundy kind of prospect, Kevin Gausman kind of prospect, you look to DL Hall, who had a fantastic year, was their first-round pick last year, but he's still probably 2 years away at the earliest. And they just drafted Grayson Rodriguez this past June, and he's a high school pitcher, and certainly a lot of upside there, but he's at least 2 or 3 years away. So I look at where this organization is from a prospect standpoint, and the cupboard's not bare. They don't have the worst system in the league or anything like that, but where's the upside? And to the point that you just made, where is the Matt Wieters, Jonathan Scope, Manny Machado types? Where are those guys? I mean, 10 years ago, in 2008, when the Orioles were still very much in the midst of the abyss of 14 years of losing in a row, 10 years ago, they were still able to sell at that point in time that they had Brian Roberts and Nick Markakis on the Major League roster, and they had acquired this Adam Jones from Seattle, who looks like he's going to be a really good ball player, and they had just drafted Matt Wieters. So they had some high-end talent at the Major League level and in the farm system at that point that you could get excited about, and they had the cavalry at that point. Now, we know how that turned out, but there was hope in that at that point in time. I don't know if you look at their current crop of minor league pitchers and would label it a cavalry at this point. I think there's some. I think there are some guys that you like, but it's just, at least in terms of where the Baseball Americas and the Fangraphs and different sites like that, which have people that evaluate minor league talent for their livelihood, and that's not to say they're gospel or that they're right, but it seems to be a bunch of fringe to average major league talent in terms of upside.
Well, we got to find out that this is going to be maybe similar to the Sid Thrift thing from 15. I mean, most people here won't remember that, but Melvin Mora came out of that, right? And that's about it, right? Like, I don't know that they even got 5 starts out of pitchers or a year of a bullpen out of any of those. The Jacobo Sequoias. I mean, I remember some of these names because they were names that were better left forgotten, right? Back in the day. Those 15 names that are there, we're going to come back and measure those 36, 60 months from now and say, all right, where it's 2021, where were those trades from Duquette back in the summer? And if they pony him up for 3 more years here at the end, they decide that he and Brady are the way they're going to go, then, we'll be measuring him and asking him the questions about these guys. And much like anybody that deals for these guys or drafts, Brashad Perryman or Matt Elam to the bitter end, you hang in with the guys you traded for. At least there would be a little bit of that going on. But I don't know what the takeaway is here if they're going to win 65 games next year and 71 games 2 years from now. I don't know how many people want to stick around to watch that. But that's what they're going to get.
They're going to lose. Even if they had a great farm system, they would still be losing the next couple years. I mean, that's just the way it works. I mean, unless...
But they're before Cedric Mullins in July of next year, or where Trey Mancini was last year, where you'd look and you'd say, all right, I can start to see the pieces of the next Scope, Machado, Britton thing or whatever, but we have to find real baseball players here.
Sure, no question. And to be very clear, when I when I offered my assessment of the farm system, that wasn't specifically pertaining to those trades. With a lot of the players that they just acquired, it's way too soon to know. And you're dealing with a bunch of 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old players who were just traded. And I think you'll find historically a lot of prospects who are traded, they do struggle a little bit initially. So that's not to say they're going to make it. That's not to say that they're going to be busts. We just don't know. But, my point is, I guess specifically to the trades that they made at the deadline. I look at Diaz, who struggled at Bowie. He had some good moments, and certainly wasn't completely, wasn't a disaster, but really struggled when he first came over. Really, the player from the Machado trade that really stood out from a performance standpoint is Dean Kramer, who he's a pitcher who a lot of people wonder how his stuff will play at the major league level, but he has struck out a ton of batters at the single and double A levels this past season. So, he's been successful. He's probably a guy that you could envision pitching games for the Orioles the second half of next year. I mean, that's something that would make sense to me. So, he looks promising. You look at the Britton trade. We'll see about Dylan Tate. He had been shut down just because of the end of the minor league season, and because they've had such issues with their major league expanded roster with pitchers getting hurt, they had asked him to start throwing again, and his shoulder was a little sore. I don't think it's necessarily an injury, but he had been shut down for 2 weeks, and then it's like, oh, okay, we want you to pitch again. To me, that doesn't sound like something smart you want to do with one of your pitching prospects, but
they've done a lot of things with pitching. Gausman's happy to be out of here, right? There were a lot of guys that came through here that haven't dug their treatment here. I'm sure Weeder's knees. Every time that they creak, he's thinking, was it a good idea that Buck caught me 142 nights a year? I don't know, but there have been a lot of players that have come through that haven't dug them. Certainly Jake Arrieta is a great testament to a guy that left here and became a star, and how Miguel Gonzalez was treated on the way out after being a pretty good soldier around here. So, the road's littered with all of that. This isn't just about the 48 wins they're going to have this year, whatever that number is going to be. This is really about the body of work and what happens moving forward and how it's going to be different than it's been from an evaluative standpoint and from a communicative standpoint with the fans, I believe.
Yeah, and I think that's completely fair. And look, some of the issues you brought up. Weeders, for example. That's systemic as much as anything. That's the system that Major League Baseball has. You maximize the value, you extract as much value as you can from players under their first 6 years.
Yeah,
of Major
you start their clock late. You do all of that. Piss them off, right?
And every team does that. So I can't fault the Orioles for that specifically. That's a baseball thing in general. But pitching development, certainly a big question. And that's something that if they are in fact going to bring Dan Duquette, they're going to keep him and extend him, and whatever his title is, whether he runs baseball ops, whether he heads up the international market, which is something that he had a lot of success with in previous stops in his major league executive career. But I look at the lack of pitching and the poor pitching development, which precedes him. That goes back. You can go back to the mid '80s as far as when the Orioles started having problems developing pitching. That's something that predates Peter Angelos even. But those are the types of things I point to and say, you're going to continue to go with Dan Duquette here? And look, I've been one of the people saying that Duquette hasn't gotten a fair shake completely as far as being blamed with some of the moves that have been made that have either been ownership-driven, Brady Anderson-driven, Buck Showalter-driven. So I don't want to completely make it out to be that I'm anti-Dan Duquette, because I'm not. But at the same time, and this goes for Buck Showalter, this goes for the coaching staff, this goes for anyone working in their minor leagues, you kind of look at the whole thing, the entire pizza, so to speak, of problems that they have right now, and I don't think there's really that compelling of an argument to keep anyone. It just sort of comes down to, instead of saying, who should you fire, the question for me is, deserves to be kept at this point. And I'm not sure there's anyone on that list that I'm jumping up on the table screaming for to say, yeah, that person is it's not any one person's fault, but it's everyone's fault when you're in this position where you're going to be one of the 10 worst teams in modern Major League history at the end of the season.
And not only that, not only like one of the worst teams, but one of the worst teams with a payroll that's outrageous.
Sure.
You know, it's not just that we're the Padres from 15 years ago or the Marlins and we had a fire sale. I mean, next year, the fact that they're going to stink, okay, they're going to get paid to stink next year because they're not going to put any money into the team. But it's a whole different thing when you've wasted that kind of money and then still are one of the worst teams in history. That's the mind-blowing part of it. The mind-blowing part of it is they began the year with Machado, Scope, Gausman, Cobb, all these major league players, Trumbo, all of these guys, and they've put this in. I love the Caleb Joseph quote last year. We should be thinking about things all off season. I'm like, yeah, I mean, there's a heart transplant that needs to happen for this franchise, really, a soul transplant.
And look, heart and things like that. Right
the
now,
organization I'm talking about.
Right, and that's fair. Everyone should be ticked off about it. Don't get me wrong on that.
I'm not ticked off. I'm numb. Literally, I'm numb after 25 years. I really am because I haven't. I've been around it all the time. I've reported the truth, and now here we are over the next couple of years where no one is going to listen to this station or any other station to talk about baseball because they are not going to be a mainstream conversation. They're not a format. They're not something on a day-to-day basis that brings relevance to people's lives in 2018, and that's really a shame. It's nice they bring Eddie Murray and Brooks Robinson back and do all. I don't know what value that has to folks when you're going to go out there and watch a team that's going to lose 110 games again next year.
Well, they're 2 years removed from being in the playoffs, so let's not make it out that the entire body of work has been horrible. It's horrible right now. There's no doubt about it, and most of Peter Angelo's time as owner has been bad. I'm not going to dispute that, but you have to also proceed here with the end game in mind. You can't be proceeding here with trying to get people to come to games in 2019. That's really, from a baseball standpoint, that's really not the goal. The goal is you're trying to build a championship team. In the same way that if the Ravens are trying to win in 2018, Lamar Jackson being drafted in the first round really wasn't the best thing to do for that. But that's an end game kind of decision that they made. Whether
we can talk about all these organizations like that. The Giants drafted a running back, and nobody can figure out why. And I guess the Orioles are going to take Bobby Witt, right? They've already employed the family members, literally, right?
Well, but with him, we still have to see. He has one more year of high school baseball to go.
He's not going to be starting opening day next year.
No.
We're talking about a guy that they can't even draft till next year.
Bobby Witt,
who's 18 years old.
Jr. Best case scenario is Manny Machado, and he's what? So he'll be with the Orioles in the summer of 2020, 2021, I guess I should say. With that, but my point is. Decisions that you make from a baseball standpoint, and I'm not talking marketing and fan outreach and things, but because they're going to have to market this team like it's a minor league team. That's how gimmicky they're going to have to be with bells and whistles and giveaways.
Let them know if they want me to milk a cow. I live 2 blocks away. I'll be up there. I don't know how to do it, but I'll try like hell.
Right, and in fairness to them, they've tried to do some of that stuff. They had a WWE night at the ballpark.
Oh my God! They're giving away Loyola hats and UMBC hats.
They're trying to do those things, and they should be doing those things. And I'm not saying that's going to move the meter, but it
hasn't moved the meter at all. Like literally, the Loyola hats. It's beautiful, blue and gold. They sold 30 tickets. You know what I mean? Bastardizing their hat and trying to be everything to everybody after 25 years of being nothing and nobody. There needs to be a real marketing commitment here and a real community endeavor to sell tickets, to curry favor, to be nice to people. I've written about that. They just don't know how to do that. They've never done it. They've never known how to sell a ticket. They've never known how to market it. They barely know how to feel the product. They haven't even signed international players in 50. So I don't know that there's any track record here other than bring Andy McPhail back and let's let him bend over a couple of Bavazis and bring in some players. I don't know other than that how this is going to get fixed anytime in the near short term. So the one thing they can do is be nice to people and communicate with their fans and try to recruit new fans along the way. I don't know how that's possible. I really don't. I am gravely concerned about the future of the Orioles because my eyes have witnessed this over 25 years, and I don't think these kids have a clue, and I don't think the people in New York care. The next people I'm going after in the offseason is going to be Manfred and saying, what are you doing so that we don't lose our baseball team in Baltimore? What are you doing to help fortify the franchise here? Because once you pull the TV money out, once you pull literally the massive money out of this thing stinks worse than the Tampa Rays because the Tampa Rays don't have the Washington Nationals 30 miles away kicking their ass. So that's the thing I'm concerned about here moving forward, and people can poo-poo it, but I know, other astute folks like Peter Schmuck have written that the team could be in peril here in the coming years if somehow somebody doesn't come in to rescue this thing and make people start caring, being engaged, and coming to the ballpark and having an affinity for the franchise. Clearly, I have a lot of angst personally, but I know a lot of other people that they don't have angst. They just have, the opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference, and they have indifference toward the Orioles. Many, many people I know with a closet full of orange have no interest in coming back and giving them money. And Alan and I talked about it earlier in the week. I went to one game this year. I went on opening day. I guess I'll go opening day next year, but I don't know what's going to get me there on June 10th or July 4th. It's not going to be the team on the field, that's for sure. It's not going to be winning.
Well, but that's what happens when you rebuild. And, as dire as it looks, I have concerns about the long-term health of the franchise. I'd be disingenuous if I said I didn't. But
I just don't know where the money's coming from. That literally, it's going to take money to make this happen.
But you need to build an organization that can win and sustain that, and not just have a 3 or 4 year window, a 5 year window like they basically had. Which, hey, they had a nice run. They did. They had a 5 year period where they had more wins than anyone in the American League. They made the playoffs 3 times. They won a division. It's not as though they did nothing. But at the same time, you didn't reach the pinnacle, and you came on the back end of this, and it's completely bottomed out to an epic level, really. A historic level of incompetence in terms of wins and losses on the field. So that's not to say that it can't be turned around in the matter of a few years. The 2003 Tigers lost 119 games. They were in the World Series 3 years later. So it can be done. But, boy,
someone smart
you really need to make some good decisions, and you need to get lucky, and you have to have good people running your organization on both sides, the business and the baseball ops. And if you do all those things and you get lucky and you find a couple prospects that are going to be Hall of Fame caliber, at least, kind of guys, if you can find another Manny Machado and you find a guy that's finally your next Mike Messina, well,
we're already talking about a 17-year-old here like he's going to be Strasburg in 2021 and win 17. Literally, and it's only 2018, right? We're already looking for the next Hall of Famer because, let's be honest, we have the first pick in the draft. The next Ben McDonald is here, and he's coming in June, and we will talk about him and feed him and wait on him. And, I remember Brian Taylor with the Yankees. So, in baseball terms, this isn't Andrew Luck or Peyton Manning or whatever. It's a whole different incubation system here with baseball.
Oh, there's no doubt. And look, it can be the first overall pick, but you can also find great players at other parts of the draft. But it just speaks to needing to be competent and stable and investing meaningful resources in scouting on the amateur side, on the pro side, on the international side. This needs to be a multi-pronged plan that's implemented, and you're not going to have as high of a major league payroll naturally because, for one, even if you wanted to try to have a $200 million payroll, I'm not sure who's coming here anytime soon of that ilk. So take those resources and invest them meaningfully into having a stronger international presence. I don't need the Orioles to be number one in international market spending. Just don't be dead last. Let's start with that, and then let's move up from there in terms of trying to add talent. And if you can get Victor Mesa at some point here in the next few weeks, great. That's a good start. That's not the end-all, be-all, but it's a good start. But this isn't a quick fix situation. As much as you look, and you made the point, this team went into 2018 trying to contend one last time, and Was that the right decision? Of course not. But at the same time, guys like you and me who watched this thing pretty closely, neither of us predicted they were going to lose 110 games either, or 110 plus, I should say. So there was a certain amount of disbelief with how quickly this thing fell apart. I mean, even think about it. Beginning of September last year, they were right around 500. They were still, hanging around in the second wild card race. I mean, they really were. And then they were it's like a light switch went off, and this team couldn't get out of its own way on so many levels and was just horrible from that point on. So, look, should they have traded Manny Machado 2 years ago? Yeah. We've talked about that. And you can talk about some of the other guys that they should have dealt earlier. Or you can talk about the fact that I personally would have held on to Kevin Gausman until this offseason. And, if you're going to have a new baseball ops person, and if they do, we'll see, that would have been someone that I would have, kind of advertised as saying, hey, you can move this guy and start reshaping this organization in your own image. So, along the way, I've disagreed with plenty of what they've done, but where they stand right now, they have a whole lot of work to do. I don't think it's impossible to turn this thing around, but I do think it's something that you have to be realistic and say, well, it's not going to be next year, it's not going to be the year after that, it's probably not going to be the year after that even, but in the process of losing plenty of games the next 2 to 3 years, you hope to start seeing the next wave of Adam Jones and Jonathan Scope and Manny Machado. You really hope for someone like that. And you hope to get some starting pitchers who look like they can be top half of the rotation guys rather than fringe number 5 kind of guys. And, some of those types of players might be in their organization right now, and a lot of those types of players aren't yet in this organization. So it's going to be really, really challenging. And, this year, from a fan outreach standpoint, they started the program where kids 9 and under can come free. They need more of that kind of stuff, and that was a good idea. They deserve credit for that, but they need much more of that. And one thing that we haven't talked about that I personally want to see, if nothing else, from a fan engagement standpoint, figure out how to, and it's not figure it out, just get it done to offer in-market streaming of your games. You are begging 30-year-old and under fan base, 30 years and younger, people of that age who are cutting cable and they don't have satellite, you are begging them to completely tune you out forever if you continue to not allow in-market streaming. It's the Orioles, the Nats, and as of at least earlier this year, I haven't heard if there's a remedy, the Dodgers. Those are the only teams in Major League Baseball who do not have in-market streaming of their baseball games. It's 2018. It's not 2005. People were watching TV on their computers and their mobile device and things of that nature, and it doesn't mean you give it away for free. I'm not saying that, but the fact that I subscribe to Masson through my cable provider and I can't stream games on my phone when I'm out somewhere, that's ridiculous. So that's something, if nothing else, from a fan engagement standpoint, believe me, there needs to be plenty else, but if nothing else, that's something that needs to be done. I mean, that's embarrassing that you're the last team standing in terms of not allowing people in the greater Baltimore area and the region, kind of beyond that. It goes farther than that you can't have people aren't allowed to stream your games online. I mean, it's insane. And that's something that's just completely short-sighted.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke. He will continue to root for, cover, opine on, and accurately cover the Baltimore Orioles because they let him in. They don't let me in. Must be the color of my skin. I'm going to be all crazy about the press pass thing here in the offseason now. They lost 118 games, and I want to come back. By the way, what's your prediction on the actual loss at the end of the week? Is the number going to be 116, 117? What's our real number here that we're going to hang our hat on for losses at the end?
I think we're going to see 115 or 116. That's kind of I think.
I'm wondering whether it's an even or an odd number. I mean, we should put $1 in, and you take even, I'll take odd, and wherever it lands, we'll get a free beer out of it. I don't know what else we can wager on at this point. But, stuck on, well, they can't lose more than 117, right? So it's 14, 15, 16, or 17 if they lose them all. But, I look back at this year, and I don't know what the scholars are going to say about 2018 Orioles, right?
It really is amazing from the standpoint of what you said a little bit earlier, that this team had visions, even if it was a low probability scenario. Now, I didn't think they were going to make the playoffs this year, but
could they be worse next year? I mean, literally, could they lose one? I mean, I'm not being mean.
They won't lose more next year, and I'll tell you why. Because the probability of the number of, I mean, this is going to go down as one of the 6 or 7 worst teams, if not even smaller than that, a smaller group than that. The probability of losing that many games again, and I went back and looked at the 62 Mets, the 2003 Tigers, I think it's a 1915 or 16 at Philadelphia A's, all of those teams that are right up there as far as losing that many games. Don't get me wrong, they were still bad the following year, but it's almost like the Red Sox this year. You know, they just set their club record for wins. They're not going to win 108 games again next year. I mean, it's just the probability of that is so incredibly small. So on the flip side, even with the Orioles, and they're still going to be bad, and believe me, I still think they'll lose 100 games next year, but I don't think they're going to be in the 115, 116 loss territory that they're going to find themselves at the end of the season. So, yeah, I guess the wins and losses question for next year will just very simply be, can they avoid triple digits? And I'm saying that's probably going to be really tough for them to do.
They're not even going to catch the Tigers. The Tigers lost 119. It's not even that bad.
Yeah, well, and like I said, hey, the Tigers were in the World Series a few years later, so I guess you look at those types of things, and you remember the Orioles 4 years ago, they were getting ready to go to the ALCS. It shows how much things can change in a matter of 4 years, but boy, the decision-making needs to be way better in the next 4 years than it's been over the last 4 years, that's for sure.
Who's going to make the playoffs first, the Oakland Raiders or the...
I guess I'll go with Oakland just because the NFL is more conducive to quick turnarounds, but... and I guess I should say they'll probably be the Las Vegas Raiders by then, so...
Well, and, you know, everybody's a winner and a loser there. All right, man, I've had enough. I'll see you in Sarasota in March, all right?
I'm sure we'll see who the new GM, even if it's the old GM, and we'll see who's going to be the manager. I mean, at this point, I think Buck Showalter knows, and I think he's ready to walk away and
run away.
We'll see how this all plays out, because once the season ends officially, that's, to me, where things start to get interesting again. Playing out this string has not been fun.
Oh, yeah, if you thought the regular season was a circus, wait till next week.
I know, right?
He is Luke at WNST.net, and Baltimore Luke out on Twitter. He will be with the Ravens. I will not punish you with more Orioles conversation or too much here in the near short term. We got football, and we got the Steelers this week. You can find me out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. The morning newspaper ships to your email inbox free of charge each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. It's always $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life, and there is a Planet Fitness right around the corner from you. Also brought to you by the Maryland Jockey Club and Laurel, where they have renovated, upgraded. You got to get down to Laurel and see the sports book down there. It is beautiful, and I guess it'll have great crab cakes and cold beer for the Maryland Million on October 20th. Make sure you mark that on your calendar. The entries on the front of WNST.net as well as in our morning newspaper each and every day. Last but never least, breaking news happens first on the WNST Tech Service. When Buck Showalter is fired or leaves or whatever they're going to call it, departs, walks away, gets on a boat. He lives in Dallas, though. There's no boat. He'll be on a plane. You'll get it first on the WNST Tech Service, all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Colossus will be here on Thursday, driving you home from 3 until 5. It is the SSV on WNST. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.